don't pick the drop tables one though, because Apple probably does not, is not protected against injection attacks.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we'll take down the whole iTunes store.
I do like I'm double meta, or meta, however you'd like to pronounce it. I thought that was good.
Who says meta? I've heard that occasionally, but it's much more rare than, the GIF thing. Like that's like a 50-50, but meta? No, sorry, that's not good.
This reminds me of when I brought up the Bros phase in neutral, but I wrote my first VA list function a few minutes ago. Like all this time, I've known that it's a thing. I've known, that this is how you do variable argument list C functions, but I've never actually needed to write one.
Really?
Until like an hour ago.
God, I did that at my first job, which was C++ for DOS. I don't remember why I did it, but I did it, and it was weird. So what'd you use it for? Am I allowed to ask?
Yeah, if you want. For my new big thing, I've now done in substantially shipping products. I've now done both core data in the magazine, and granted that's a pretty light use of core data, but it's still a shipping productive or production use of this thing for a real app that's not entirely trivial. So I've used core data. And in Instapaper, I used SQLite just raw, and I made a few lightweight utility functions to wrap on top of it, but I didn't. Everything was really just done via like raw queries and raw calls to the SQLite API. And I know it's not pronounced SQLite, and I don't care. I also say GIF. Oh well, so suck it. So anyway, So for my new project, now that I've seen both, I would like to get back to SQLite a little bit, just because core data is really nice for a very large set of things, but this is something where I expect to be dealing with a lot of data. And I know when you have large data sets that core data performance problems can pretty easily arise and can often be very, very hard to get around. So I decided to use Gus Mueller's awesome FMDB, which is a pretty lightweight wrapper around SQLite. And what I decided to build was a similarly lightweight model class on top of that. And this is one of those things where if you hear a programmer saying they made their own model class, chances are it was a bad idea. And mine,
whoa.
chances are mine is probably a bad idea as well, but I'm doing it anyway, just like writing my own blog engine and roasting my own coffee. I'm doing these things anyway, even though it's generally not worth it, and I'm probably like... So, okay, the main argument against this is the classic, like, programmer know-it-all wanting to rewrite something really critical that everyone's done a million times, and chances are my version is going to have bugs. The re-implementing Unix joke, or Emacs, or Lisp, or whatever the joke is. They're probably all three.
It's Lisp.
It is Lisp? Okay, I thought it was Unix. Okay, I'll have to look that up. Anyways, actually, of course you're right, John. This is the kind of thing you would know.
It's not re-implementing. It's like, if any program eventually includes a, half-ass buggy re-implementation of Lisp or something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is the thing I'm referring to. Okay, anyway. And there's already probably a million of these things out there, but I don't like using other people's frameworks that do substantial, like non-trivial things. I don't generally tend to use those, except Apple's and things that I just really could not write myself. And I'm okay using other people's like utility functions, stuff like that, and that's why I'm okay using FMDB, because not only do a lot of people use it, and Gus Mueller's a good programmer, but I can look at the code. It's not a very large library. It's actually very, very compact, and it really is just like it's really just convenience wrappers around SQLite for the most part. And so it's pretty thin.
So you're not like an AF networking fan then?
AF networking, I added it to the magazine fairly late. Like I think in the most recent version of the magazine, I think I added it for some relatively some relatively trivial thing. I really just wanted to try it. I know AF networking is very, very good, and its programmer is that Matt with 3 T's Thompson who writes that?
I believe that's right.
Well, anyway,
I'm not
he's
sure.
really, really good. So that's the kind like I have no problem using his code because he's ridiculously good. We'll have to look that up. I'm pretty sure it's him. But and it's another thing. Everyone uses AF networking, so I know that it probably is not buggy, and if there is a bug, it's probably going to get fixed pretty quickly. So, and that's another thing. Like they do a lot of things there. It's still a fairly thin layer, though. Like I mean, different parts of it, I guess, are different widths or thicknesses, but yeah. So anyway, long story short, I decided to write my own model class, and this involves anytime you write something like this, there's a lot of weird design decisions you have to make. This is one of the first times I've really had to dive in to Objective-C runtime stuff, and I'm trying to avoid it being hacky and bad. And I'm calling into some runtime functions to basically do reflection, and I know we had a whole reflection topic on the topic list. I wonder if we can get to this now. But
we certainly can.
Yeah, but like in dynamic languages, like most of the web languages, like the advanced scripting languages and stuff, it's easy to it's very, very easy to just inspect your variables and see what the class has and do crazy things to it and everything else. With Objective-C, a lot of that is possible. Some of it's not, but it's actually more possible than I thought it was. So one thing I'm doing is, the model class has its own dictionary mapping column names to their values.
Oh,
and
that's so awful. But carry on.
Wait, hold on. Go on.
Well, it's awful.
This is the time to tell me.
Well, it's awful in that coming from a .NET background and C# background, that is not at all how I would handle it. But in Objective-C, that probably is exactly how I would handle it. So I'll tell you the other approach when you're done. So I'm sorry. Carry on.
No, please tell me now.
Oh, all right. So you've just lost the floor for an hour, and John, you might as well just hang up. So one of the things I've been wanting to talk about on ATP for a long time is having a leg in both the .NET and the Objective-C and Cocoa worlds is that there's a lot of obvious differences between the two platforms. And by and large, I really, really like the decisions that Apple's made. And my friend Jamie Pinkham said to me once, when I was complaining about, for example, how convoluted handling dates are within Cocoa, he said, and I was saying, oh, well, why isn't there just a date class that handles everything? And he said it more eloquently than I'm about to recount it, but he said something to the order of, is it really that complex, or is it just properly abstracted? And it was one of those, total mind explosions. And I was like, you know what, you're actually right about that. And so by and large, I think that Cocoa and Cocoa Touch are really, really well done. However, reflection in Cocoa and Cocoa Touch, not as well done as I would like. So let's give you an example by way of how would I have done the same thing in .NET. And this all cued for me when you tweeted about 3 or 4 days ago about what do you call the thing that represents the unique identifier for an object. Naturally, in most languages, that would be ID. But in Objective-C, you can't really do that because
that's not
ID
true,
is a key.
actually. You can. It works just fine, which is a little bit scary, which is probably why you shouldn't do it.
Well,
but it does work.
Right.
You can name a variable ID. Mine was even type ID.
God, that makes me hurt so bad. But the point I'm driving at is whether or not it's tactically allowed, it's just not a good plan. And I think we can all agree about that. So what would I have done in .NET? Well, what's really great about .NET is reflection is, in my personal opinion, kind of a first-class portion of the language. And .NET is really metadata heavy. So what that means is when I have what a .NET programmer would call a field, but a Objective-C programmer would call an IVAR, basically a variable within a class, I can actually decorate that variable with arbitrary things that we call attributes. So if you imagine a class definition, you can say that you have a variable that's called unique identifier, for example. Well, you can put an attribute that's associated with that variable, and that attribute is actually an instance of a class that inherits from a certain base class called, guess what, attribute. So I could make an attribute that decorates that field that specifies what the column name is for that IVAR. So let me play this back. I've got a class. I've got a class that's in my application that may or may not use the same terms as I want to use in my data store. So I could call whatever this is, this variable, like I said, unique identifier, I could call that unique identifier in my C# code, but I could decorate it with an attribute that says, hey, when you go back to the database, it's actually called ID. And so that's really, really powerful, being able to easily, and that's the key here, easily introspect and reflect upon yourself and see what metadata you have about your own classes. And I use this constantly. When I first learned about it, it was one of those things where I had a hammer, so everything was a nail. And I'm not proud of that, but as I've gotten to be a more mature programmer, I still use this all the time. And you can write your own custom attributes, like I said. You can use a ton of existing attributes, but being able to decorate your code and give yourself help on what to do with your code is the most powerful thing in the world. So to bring this back to Cocoa, what I would have liked to have been able to do is do the same thing, or for you to have been able to do is to do the same thing and have this IVAR that's maybe called identifier, but in the database is called ID. And you don't have to have a stupid freaking dictionary or hash table or whatever the case may be hanging out doing that conversion. It's all in line. It's a first class part of that class. Did that make any sense at all?
It did. That's actually really cool. Because, I mean, I think there actually is buried in the runtime a way in Objective-C to attach arbitrary objects to any NS object, but I don't think it's publicly exposed. And either way, like, that you probably shouldn't be doing things with that. There's a lot of things with designing low-level model and reflection type classes and things like that. There's a lot of times where like there's something you can do that you probably shouldn't do, right. And a lot of room for terrible hacks.
Right, and you could do an associated object, but that's a little bit different because that's more of saying, I'm probably going to butcher this because I haven't done it in a while, but if memory serves, that's saying, hey, for this instance of this class, I want to have this arbitrary object associated with it. Whereas what I'm talking about is, at a class level, I'm defining an additional piece of metadata that's part of that class definition. And again, it's just extremely powerful. And I think you're right, Marco. I think you can do a lot of this with Objective-C. And I've looked into reflection in Objective-C, and a lot of it is possible, a whole heck of a lot of it. But the thing that's crummy about it, and we've complained about this as a threesome before, is that you got to drop into the C runtime. And you were saying this just a few minutes ago. You got to drop into the Objective-C runtime, which is all straight C, which once you get used to the cushy world of Objective-C, it's just, ugh. It's gross.
It's not that. I mean, I had to write malloc and free earlier today for the first time in a while, but it's like 10 lines of C in the middle of this wonderful Objective-C cushy playland. I mean, it's not that bad.
So what would you have done in PHP? And John, I'd like to know where Perl fits in if we ever give you a chance to talk. But what would you have done if you were trying to solve the same problem in PHP?
Well, I have solved the same problem in PHP. I use for Instapaper, for the magazine, for the new things. I do use my own MVC framework that is very thin and lightweight, so I can use SQL directly. All the same goals, actually. Most of the same goals. And so I have solved this problem in PHP, and I basically, I think I do roughly the same thing with storing the attributes of a model object as a dictionary of strings to value of keys to values, and those keys match the database column names, and there's all sorts of things you can do. By the way, I love. If Merlin is actually listening to this, and if he's still listening, I'm getting him back so hard for all that comic book talk and back to work.
Hi, Merlin.
This is glorious. There's always. This is one of the reasons why I like doing this kind of programming at this level, solving these kinds of problems, even though they've been solved a million times before, even though my implementation might not be very good for some people or for some things or for myself even. I love it because there's so many design decisions that you can make that really do have a pretty big impact. So one of the things, and I don't want to talk about this for too much of the show just because I think it will get a little bit boring, even for people who aren't Merlin, but I think one of the things about one of the hardest parts about this is like how do you expose the database fields on the object, and how much code or boilerplate has to be written to like in the subclasses. So in the model classes, how much do you have to do, and how are the columns represented? So in my thing, I actually do a very similar trick to what Core Data does, because you can tell at runtime, which I actually don't know why you can tell this at runtime, but you can. You can tell at runtime whether a property was declared dynamic, or whether its implementation was declared dynamic, and whether and what if it has custom getters or setters. All that stuff is available at runtime from the runtime APIs. So I'm basically making it so that you can set and get arbitrary column names just via a dictionary API, but it also treats any dynamic property as a database column. So, and then it does useful things. So like you can have a property that's an NSURL, and if you declare it dynamic in the implementation file, then the runtime will see that, and so at runtime it'll say any access to and from that is the database field named that. And then you can just call save, and it works. And you can call the query functions, get them, and it maps into them on read. So it's just very simple model layer. I don't. This is one of the reasons why I write my own model layers in the languages that I like. I don't usually like the model layer to have to do that much, and specifically like. I treat databases the way that most programmers of previously high-traffic web applications treat databases, which is infrequently and gently. And so I don't like ORMs and really these like crazy, very high-functioning model-type APIs where they'll like go look up associated objects for you and do extra queries on your behalf. And I don't like query builders. I like to write the query myself so I can choose exactly how it's querying the database and optimize it. And I don't like anything that creates the tables for me. I don't like the core data GUI about the model declarations and the migrations. Oh, migrations are rough. So I'm basically doing something that it is more of a convenience wrapper than a functional wrapper, if that makes sense. Like it's not doing a whole bunch of magic. It's just getting rid of boilerplate. Does that make sense?
It does. And I guess to me, I view a model as the buffer between the completely myopic database world and the completely myopic application level. And to me, and I agree with you that a model should be extremely dumb. It should basically be a bucket and nothing else. But I would hate not having it around, because I want my application code to speak with classes to classes and very little else, and I want my database to speak to itself in some intermediary layer that translates from database to model and back. And I think we're saying the same thing. But I can't. When you said I'm writing a model and I can't believe I'm doing that, et cetera, et cetera. It struck me funny because I would hate not to have one.
Yeah. So, John.
I was about to say, John, where do you land on all this?
I want to get back to something that Marco said in the beginning when he introduced this topic about how he was making his own model class, and that's probably a mistake. And Casey said he thought it wasn't. And when I'm thinking about this topic, I see that a lot. It's kind of like a class system pun for programmers. And
I love you have to label your puns.
Yeah, maybe Marco has a lot, but I mean it like, you know how I mean it. Maybe Marco has not seen this as much as Casey, who's been out in a JOB job for longer, but I see it all the time. People can draw distinctions of all sorts with programmers based on their experience, what language they use, what their education is, or whatever. And this distinction, I think, is the most important one, much more so than any of those other things. No matter what their education is, how long they've been doing it, what language they're writing in, I usually tend to bin programmers into two groups. One is the programmers who take something that someone else wrote and use it to make a program. They learn Ruby on Rails and they make a web application. They learn UIKit and they make an iOS application, right? And those people distinguish between the magical elves that make the things they're going to use to write their program and their program. And the second set of people make no distinction between the things they're using to write their program and their program. It's all one continuous thing. And those are the people who are going to write their own thing, even though the vendor provides one. Or those are the people who are going to write their own web frameworks, or their own blog engines, or like, in the extreme case, their own language. Like, it's a complete continuum, and there's no hard and fast line between these are the words that I type to make my program work, and this is my program. I don't know if you want to call them tool builders, because you don't necessarily have to be that type of thing, but there are some people who will never cross that line, and in every environment they find themselves in programming, they will draw that distinction somewhere and say, that is other, and I don't do that, and that is magic, and I call those things to make my program work, and then my program is a series of conditionals and loops and variables and classes or whatever that use that thing to do their work. And I think that distinction is like when I heard Marco say, I probably shouldn't write I probably shouldn't write my own model class. Being afraid to trying to draw that line and using it as a barrier and saying I shouldn't cross over the line. Now, one is practicality, maybe you shouldn't write your own language and compiler to do this, tip calculator program or something, right? So that's one side of it. But the other side of it is that I see a lot of people who draw that line and are afraid to ever cross it. And everyone starts with that line because you don't know what the heck you're doing when you start out, right? But I would encourage everybody who thinks they can recognize that line to realize that line doesn't exist. It's all just one big continuum of code written by people. And there's no reason you can't write a better one of whatever it is that you're using all the way up and down the chain. And in some cases you should. And obviously, knowing when you should and when you shouldn't is a whole separate matter, but never I wouldn't, even Marco, just if there's a reason not to do it, it's not because I'm going to screw it up and I'm not going to do it. Because the people who made those things are at a certain point, they're just other people too, right? It's who made FMDB? It's just another guy, right? And the only way you will ever get good at doing something like that is to decide, I'm going to make my own thing here. And then your thing might not be as good, but the fifth version of your thing will be as good. And then you've just become one of those people. Now that line is gone. So that's my take on this whole, on the meta topic too. I'm doing a meta topic for a metadata topic. Get it? I'm double meta. And as for the things, the actual things you're all talking about there, I don't want to go all Simpsons did it on you, but I always do. Simpsons did it, right? So, all this stuff is kind of old hat in the Perl world. And the path that I've sort of traveled, and I think a lot of the Perl communities traveled in the same topic is, kind of, in the beginning, you've got a way to send SQL queries somewhere, and that's annoying, and someone writes some nicer way to wrap that up, and that's nicer, but then you're like, okay, well, now I want to make some classes associated with things that are going to be associated with tables, and it's kind of annoying to write all that, which fields are associated with which columns, and like Marco was getting to, how much do I have to write? After you've done 10 or 20 of those things, at a certain point, you're like, can I type less and get the same effect? All right, and then you're like, you know what? Can I type even less? You go the active record Rails type thing where you're like, why do I have to type anything? Can't it just inspect the database and figure out what all the columns are and do all that stuff for me? And it's like, look, I can type one line and my whole thing is done, right? And you can do that in dynamic languages. You can probably do that in Objective-C if you really wanted to get down and dirty with the Objective-C runtime, although you probably don't. But just don't have anything. Just inspect the database, figure out the classes, figure out the tables, make your classes based on them, have a thing that manages the conventions for naming and all this other crap, And I think the next step beyond that, which I found probably the biggest leap, the first biggest leap was the one where you get into the race to see how little typing you can do to get useful work done. And the second biggest leap, I think, is when you get to the point where you realize that tying your classes to the structure of your database tables is a terrible idea. Not just in terms of the field names, but structurally, period. Because maybe this doesn't happen in small projects or projects with a single developer, but in large projects in big companies that evolve over many, many years, inevitably the structure of your database has almost no relation to the way you want your application to work. Not at all. Not on a table basis, not on anything, but it's just ridiculously divergent. And in some ways you could say, well, that's bad because things are diverging and they're getting all messed up. But sometimes it's necessary because the way your data is structured has to evolve in a direction for performance or scaling reasons that has no bearing whatsoever on how you would like to deal with it in your application. So I think the next step in the sequence is to give yourself tools to get your data out of the database, but make sure you don't tie any of what you guys are calling model objects, although I hate that term, You don't tie any of the inner workings of your application to the structure or storage location or anything having to do with the stuff in the database. You still need some tool to make it so you don't have to type a million lines of code every time you want to get data out of the database and, inflate your values into URL objects and data objects and do all that nice stuff. And, you still want to be able to not have to type that annoying boilerplate code, but you have to make another like box on the graph and say, okay, this is my code that gets the crap out of the database. This is what's gets created from the data in the database, and those two are pretty much entirely unrelated. So, and actually, this helps in development too, because you can mock out the stuff that you don't have in the database, and other stuff you can just have text files, and other stuff you can just hard code stuff. Or like the rest of your application won't care because it deals with things that have no relation to the storage location or structure of the thing. And sometimes, even when you're doing a project yourself, that can free you to say, this is the correct table structure, which you know from like just doing database stuff. You know which queries are going to be efficient, what indexes you need, what things should be normalized and not. But when I'm in my application, it would be convenient if the structure was really like this. So make the things that your application deals with look the way they're most convenient for your application to deal with, and then have some sort of layer, which yes, is sometimes annoying to write, but it will save you later. Some sort of layer that translates between the two in sometimes Byzantine ways. So that I think is a case where all the things you're talking about with reflection come in at every level of that, because the thing you make that like makes it convenient for you to get stuff out of the database, that needs metadata. And then the next thing that you make that takes the data from the database and puts it into the things that your application is going to deal with, like your application's idealized view of the world that doesn't reflect the possible nastiness of the database because of weirdness, that needs some metadata to do that thing, because you don't want to write that code up all by yourself. And then finally, your application, your top level thing, gets to deal with objects that are magically delicious, that are just like, wow, this is so convenient. This is exactly what I needed for my application. It's your idealized view of the world. Wouldn't it be great if we just had 3 objects and they did this? And you're like, because it's so hard to do that when you're an experienced programmer, because you think, but that object can't exist to do that, because I know that's going to be on these 2 tables, and this information is from a 3rd table, and so you end up making things that are tied to your database table. So that's more or less the path I've walked on this topic in Perl and in other languages. And it's some people, they call it like anti-ORM backlash, because like the ORM is like the active record phase, and you get to that phase and you realize you're kind of in a dead end and you've done a terrible thing. But you're not really. Like, you've created something that's useful, but you need something else as well. So everything that you've done is helping you move forward. There's just another place where you can also move forward. That was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I have to let that settle in. I think you're right, though, that there's always this kind of battle between the objects that are fully abstracted from the data and the messiness or the structure of the database. One of the things that I think Core Data does a little bit badly for my taste is that it's too much on that object side, where Core Data, even though it is based on a database storage engine and in many ways behaves like a database, in many ways it doesn't let you treat it like a database. And so you're kind of like there's a whole class of operations that that are very easy to do in a database. Things like a lot of things involving multiple records or batches or ranges or things like that. Things that Core Data either can't do very well or can't do at all.
Yeah, it's trying to give you the idealized object version, but not letting you say anything about the database. It's like, you don't worry about the database. You just tell us how you want the idealized view of the world in your application, and we'll just persist that. And you're like, really, I would like to have some influence over that process, because I have some ideas that you may find interesting.
Right, exactly. And a lot of times it's also necessary for performance. When you have an app that has like a ton of data, or that has maybe one table or one object type that has a lot of entries and they're all very small or something, and you want to do some kind of batch, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, because you structure your data because like the 7 queries that your application is going to run most of the time, and what will make those queries fast and what will not make them fast. And Core Data, as far as I'm aware, gives you no way to influence the way it stores your stuff. Like, you just make your convenient object graph, and you have to kind of like either kind of guess or intuit or understand enough about Core Data's implementation of how it's going to lay that out, and have to know what operations does Core Data make available, and what queries will that translate into, and will those be efficient? And that's like, you would rather just, look, I know these are going to, like, I bet applications probably just run like, 3 possibly performance critical queries all the time. And if you just say, look, core data, just do this. This is all I want. Everything else, I don't care what you do, but these are the 3 essential queries. And it's like, nope, I will structure your stuff for you. You don't worry about it. So, like, for small applications, that's fine, but anyone's done a web application, it's not like they're taking you to do core data with web applications. But at a certain point, native applications start, not that they're not web scale, but, the timing is much more critical and the devices are slower. So at a certain point, even a native application, you would like to have that kind of influence, which is why, Marco, you keep coming back to doing your own thing with raw SQLite, because then you have control over that.
Exactly, because you have the SQLite on one side, which is SQLite, however you say it. I'm going to pronounce it every different way during the show.
You shouldn't. Don't let me bully you into my way of saying it. You say it however you want.
Isn't it officially something like SQLite?
Yeah, I don't know what the official one is either. I say it the way I say it.
Anyway, SQLite. We're going to say it every way. All right. That thing, you have that on one side, and that doesn't know anything about objects, about your objects in your code. Like, it's totally just raw. There's no attempt to even do anything higher level than just database rows, and that's it. Then on the other end, you have core data, which is all about the objects and their mappings, and it doesn't expose anything about the database and pretends like the database isn't there to you, the user of it. And so my thing is kind of in the middle, and I actually do intend to open source this. I'm writing with the intention of open sourcing it and writing it to be a standalone piece so it can be. But who knows when I'll get to that. I do intend to do that. Maybe later this fall. But my thing, I want to be in the middle of that continuum because I feel like there aren't enough choices there. And what's there is basically a whole bunch of people like me making the things for themselves with varying degrees of success, varying degrees of people using it and reporting bugs, and varying degrees of functionality. And it's a lot like to-do apps. Like, if you're the kind of person who can make one of these model layers or something like this, the chances that you're going to be happy enough with somebody else's to want to just use theirs instead of making your own is pretty low. And so, for me, I'm doing my own thing like I usually do, which is sometimes good, sometimes bad. And so, yeah, I'm making this thing kind of between SQLite and core data, and I'm going to use it, and we'll see what happens, I guess.
And I think in native applications, again, not that they're like small, but like you're not writing a system for a product that's going to have 7 incarnations. Like, if you were making, let me think of something like this, like not Gmail, not LinkedIn, maybe Facebook, maybe some sort of big giant web service used by millions of people that has 10 different ways to interface with it. Even just within your own company, that's where you really want to have your data access layer, and then above that have your object layer that gives you the idealized representation, and then have a whole bunch of other people in the company or whatever writing business logic, writing automation things, writing stuff, and all they ever use is the idealized view of the product, which has an ever-changing relationship with how things are actually stored or used, so that you're isolating the whole rest of the people. I just talked about this line between the people who are writing the thing, people who are using the thing. Individual programmers shouldn't see that line, but if you're trying to scale up a company, it's a good idea to have people building at various layers, and you want everyone who's just writing, a bunch of reports that run, or a bunch of jobs that do maintenance stuff, or the people who write the web front end, or the people who write the native app. You want all of those people to be using an interface that has almost no relation to the implementation if you could possibly help it. And then another set of people dealing with how that idealized view of the product interfaces with the data store backend, because they're going to constantly have to change it. They're going to use different data stores. They're going to rearrange stuff. They're going to do normalized tables. They're going to rename things. They're going to do different versions of tables and have and you don't want anyone else to see that. But when you're just doing one native iOS application, maybe with a web service or something, especially if you're using a different language for it, the web part of it, it's probably not critical that you make this kind of enterprisey distinction. I just offered it up as like the next evolution of, so you've gone and done yourself an active record type thing, which queries the database and gets a structure and builds all your classes on the fly according to some convention with a pluralizer and all this other stuff, and you're still sad. Maybe it's because you actually want that next thing.
Awesome.
Well, why don't you tell us about something that's pretty awesome, and then I want to speak in favor of core data briefly, and then we can give up on this probably extremely boring topic.
All right. Hang in there, Merlin. You're almost there. All right. This week, we are sponsored once again by Hover. Hover is high-quality, no-hassle domain registration. So they believe that everyone should be able to take control of their online identity, have your own domain name, and they make it easy to do so. They offer .net, co, com, TV, tons of country code TLDs. There's all these TLDs out there now. They keep making new ones. Hover keeps adding them. It's great. So they take all the hassle and friction out of owning and managing domain names. Now, I bet everyone listening to the show is probably nerdy enough to have bought a domain name in the past. And if you bought a domain name anywhere else, I imagine you were not that happy with the experience, because I've bought them in a lot of places, and they're pretty rough. In most other places are pretty rough. Hover is, to me, like a breath of fresh air. Like, they are just so easy. They're honest. They don't try to upsell you with all sorts of like weird, sleazy stuff. There's no checkbox on checkout that's like, don't not stop sending me the newsletter that doesn't sell my privacy for $10 a month. Like, they don't try to mislead you. They don't try to like get all sleazy and get more money out of you. It's just honest, direct, straightforward domain sales. And their management system is very good too. It's well designed. There's easy access to all the features they offer, and they do offer quite a lot. And in fact, they actually just added something new. They added Google Apps for Business. You can add Google Apps for Business to any domain from Hover, new or old domains. They even give you a free 30-day trial on that. And then prices start at $6 a month per user. It's really great. So anyway, go to hover.com/ATP. You can use promo code ATP to get 10% off. And you should do that. I mean, I use Dan's promo codes forever. You can use ours. So use promo code ATP at hover.com to get 10% off any domain purchase and any service purchase. Hover's a great company, really. They even have no hold phone service. You just call them Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern, and you'll be speaking to a live person. They will just pick up the phone, and there's a person. It's not a bot. You don't have to say representative, track a package, none of that stuff. I hate it. All those things are terrible. They know that too. They don't do it. They give you only a human. It's just great. So go to hover.com/ATP to get your next domain. Use promo code ATP for 10% off. Thanks a lot to Hover for sponsoring the show.
So to briefly speak in favor of core data, so my really crummy, although soon to be not crummy since it's all straight UI kit, so it's going to look great in iOS 7, but my really crummy iPhone app, which I wrote basically as an exercise to teach myself how to write an iPhone app. And
you can plug it. That's allowed.
It's called Fast Text, and it's embarrassing on iOS 6, but it's going to be brilliant on iOS 7 because I'm going to change virtually nothing, and it will all just look magical and pretty. But in any case, the app doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. The point is to do one thing really quickly, and that's send a canned text message. So the idea is you pop open the app, you say who you want to send it to, which is presumably a list of people that you've already set up. What message you'd want to send, or maybe I got that backwards. I think I did because I haven't used it in a couple days. But anyway, the point is you pick who, you pick what, and then you say go. And that actually uses core data. And that is actually a really, really great use of core data because, candidly, it's very, very simple. It's two entities. It's a total of like 10 attributes between the two entities. And it worked really well. And one of the things I liked so much about it was that when I decided to add support for sending messages to email addresses as well as just phone numbers, I had to add a column, if you will, or an attribute to say, well, is this thing an email address or a number? And obviously I could have parsed that out, whatever. The point I'm driving at, though, is that I had to do a core data migration. And to be honest, for me, because this was such a simple use case, it actually worked really, really well. It was really nice. And I said in Xcode, hey, I'm going to make a new version of this model. Here's what's different about it. Then I wrote a couple of lines of code in my app delegate to handle it, and everything just happened magically. And I've actually had no real issues with core data, but to be fair, this is an extremely simple use case. And to me, I think that's what's great. This is core data's bread and butter. is to do something really simple. All I want was a way in which I can persist a very small object graph, and that's like out of the book, which I would look up if the developer portal was up. It's like out of the book exactly what core data is meant for. So I agree with what you're saying, that in a lot of ways core data is this really big scary abstraction that you don't want to just relinquish your life to, so to speak. But for me, it worked out really, really well.
You could have just used property lists. I mean, not just
sure.
not just the property list back end of core data, but like literal property lists, because like the volume of data. So yeah, you basically made like the sample application they would have you make. Like if you're doing like the core data
What are you
demo.
saying, man?
No, I mean like for the core data part, like you said, like 2 entities and like not a lot of them, because I don't know how many text messages like your application can store as a limit, but presumably people are not going to store 10,000 canned text messages because you've defeated the purpose of the application, because you're supposed to find it quickly. So like, yeah, you could have gotten away with the property list, and in fact, that's what a lot of people did for a long time. They just, at a certain point, it becomes ridiculous, but
you're absolutely right. And a lot of fast text, a lot of the purpose of it was in a series of engineering lessons and exercises for myself. And part of the reason I used core data was just, I want to learn core data. I want to see what it's all about. So when everyone complains and moans about it, I can say, oh, yeah, I understand why you're saying that. And I could complain and moan, with the next guy, but for me, it actually worked out really nicely.
Yeah, no, and you should have plugged your program sooner, because you kept mentioning your program, and I never bothered to look up what it was. And I looked up what it was, like, I don't know, maybe you tweeted something about it this week, and I'm like, oh, that's a useful program. You should, I don't know if there's 100 other programs out there that do that, and obviously I don't send text messages to people, so that's why I'm not in that field. But that's exactly, I think that would be, is this a common category of program, the canned text message sender?
Well, I don't know if it's common, but it was actually, it's funny hearing Marco talk about a lot of the things that he's talked about, both in Build and Analyze and here. It was a very funny exercise, an interesting exercise for me, because I'd love to be able to just magically invent the next Instapaper and be able to do something independently and
right, and that didn't have any competition.
Time. Right, exactly. But what I'm driving at is, it would be cool to not to work for myself, but I feel like I need that magical idea. And so flashback to, I think it was iOS 4, when I want to say it's MF Message Compose View Controller or whatever it is. Basically, they added the ability for an app to send text messages. And so I found that out at that WWDC, which I guess was 2011. Is that right? It doesn't matter. I found out at that WWDC that, they're going to do this. And I was like, I know what I can do with that. And so I had to figure out how to build and ship the app in order to, I wanted to be in on day one of iOS 4. And so the reason I think it's so funny is because in the smallest, littlest way, this was a Casey-sized exercise in doing the sorts of things that many of my peers do for a living, in that I had an idea and I needed to execute, and I needed to execute by a certain date. Not unlike what, say, Underscore did with Feed Wrangler. And it was just a very funny thing, and that's why it was really rewarding, because I was able to get this little appropriately sized view of the world that a lot of my good friends and peers have. I don't know, that was kind of a side note, but yeah, I don't know. It's fun. It's a very simple app, but it's very useful, and I use it all the time.
So if you didn't write that app, if you went into the App Store, like, have you looked at the competitors? Are there other applications that do
this?
There
certainly are.
Is there a well-known one that most people use that I would know about if I was into texting?
I don't know if there's a well-known one. I mean, it's because
like there's no Instapaper of the market.
If there is, I don't know it, to be honest. And I've never taken the app was not a money-making venture. In fact, I've probably put a couple $100 into it that I haven't gotten out. I mean, I've gotten checks from Apple for it, but I've spent more between the $100 annual developer account and paying $40 or whatever it was for Opacity Express to hand draw the world's worst icon.
I like it.
I was pretty proud of it, to be honest. But if I'm honest with myself, it's pretty rough. Anyway.
I think I saw the icon, and if it's what I'm thinking of, it's no good.
Thank you for not letting me down, John.
No, but like that actually is what. Speaking of applications, that is a lot of the time what separates the application that someone makes and like barely makes back its money in developer fees, and the one that does is putting in a little bit of extra money for a designer to do your icon, and like getting the UI to look nicer, like window dressing, marketing type, not marketing in terms of like paying money to advertise or whatever, but like when someone sees your page, what is the impression they get? And Apple hammers this like crazy in WWDC. Like the first impression someone gets when they glance at your application, has no reflection on the functionality in your application, because if there are a lot of these applications that send canned text messages, what's going to differentiate them is like the one that like makes someone feel good to have it on their home screen, feel good to launch it and use it, and every time they do, they feel good about that experience. That's why iOS 7 is such an opportunity, because all of a sudden these applications that people used to feel good about using, now they will not feel as good when they're using iOS 7, because those ones will look old and ugly and strange or whatever. So that could have been all that separated you from perhaps not Instapaper level success, but at the very least, being in the black instead of the red on lifetime for this application is just a nicer icon, a little bit nicer UI.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
And some screenshots with like puppies in them or something.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's the thing is, again, this was more, the FastText was written in order for me to be able to look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, you did get something in the App Store. And even if everyone around you thinks it's a flaming turd, at least you can say, you know what, one way or another, that's mine, and I did that. And I wrote it at a time where I barely could write Hello World in Objective-C. And that's not to say it's not stable and whatnot and blah, blah, blah. What I'm driving at, though, is that it was a really great exercise to teach myself this entire pipeline. And I'm really glad I did it. And I keep it there, to be honest, if I'm really candid, I keep it there more as kind of a trophy for myself. Look at what I was able to do. And everyone else who may have seen it and is listening may or may not be laughing about all that, but I'm okay with that because I'm still proud of it, even though it looks like crap in iOS 6. But wait for iOS 7. It's going to be great.
I'm watching it just climb the ranks tonight as all 204 live listeners go out and buy it.
Something
We're
like
going to have a Casey self-esteem sale where don't buy it to use it, buy it to acknowledge Casey's trophy for. I mean, hey, it's farther than I got with my iOS idea when they announced the SDK, which was a joke tip calculator, which I wrote about half of, and then I said, you know
Wait, what's the joke?
What?
I've said this before on other projects. So it was a tip calculator, which I knew there would be a bazillion of because it's like 5 minutes to write, and and sure enough, there were a bazillion of them. And the name of the application is It Does Other Things, which is probably a copyright infringement on Seinfeld, but that's the joke. Yeah, I don't know. Have you seen that episode? Have you heard of Seinfeld's television
the app is
show?
called It Does Other Things?
Yes. Have you ever seen Seinfeld?
Yeah, I think I've seen all of them, but
it
was a long time ago.
Not know that line from what episode?
I forget what the context was.
Oh, well. Anyway, you can Google for It Does Other Things Seinfeld and find out. It's not that funny, which is one other reason why the application does not appear on the store. But that's, I mean, I bailed out because I saw the writing on the wall, but I would have liked to have just gotten through the process. The reason I don't go through the process is because, say I get a working application that does what I wanted to do, then I need at least double that amount of time to work on the icon and the UI, because otherwise I'll just obsess over it. Be like, no, I can't ship this, it's too boring looking, and then by that point 8,000 other tip calculators have come out and it's too late.
I would love to see you ship an app.
That's
Of
right.
anything. I mean, I don't care what it did or didn't do. I would just love to see what you consider shippable. Because honestly, I'd be shocked if you ever shipped something like that in public. I guess your reviews are even larger scale than most people's apps.
They're much larger scale receptacles for feedback. Let's say. People have opinions and they offer them on writing. Writing is much worse than putting on. I mean, look at all the open source code I've put out. All the Perl, most of the Perl code that's up on CPAN for me is just terrible because it's been written years and years ago. And I leave it up there because, maybe someone's finding it useful or whatever. But it's kind of the difficult thing about working in a regular job. You try to do open source stuff so you have something that you can show as here's an example of my code. But all of my open source stuff at this point, I'd be like, don't look at that. Let me tell, the best thing I could do if everyone on a job interview would be here's some sample code from my open source projects, and let me tell you what's wrong with it as a demonstration of how I've grown since I wrote this thing.
That would be
That is
surprisingly
really good.
effective in an
Yes, it
interview,
would.
I think.
Yeah, but you want to show them as here's my shipping app. That's what that's how you get a job in Apple. You're look, I made this app, and then I'm awesome, and the app is awesome. Hire me, and then Apple hires you. That's the easiest way in the door.
So to build on the thought of you shipping something that people can see, since you're a celebrity in the little bubble in which we live, does that, if you had a really good idea, do you think that would prevent you or scare you off from, actually, I guess I could ask both of you, but
I'm always looking for a good idea for an iOS app. I have been since day one. The tip calculator, like that's like me looking for an idea. My brother is also constantly trying to look for an idea. He's trying to look for a get rich quick idea, and I'm so much. To be frank, whereas we just try we've talked about $1 million homepage before, right? Haven't we?
Oh yeah. Well, not on the show, I don't think, but
yeah, and maybe in real life. But anyway, that's the ultimate idea where you have no money at risk, no time at risk, really easy to do, makes money, makes everybody happy who's involved with the project, is amusing to people who are not involved with the project. Like that's pretty much the best example of that type of project I've ever seen in my life. And if there's an iOS app equivalent yet, I haven't found one. There's plenty of ways to make money in the App Store that are scummy and scammy and make people sad, but that's not what we're looking for. And of course, you can make money like the old-fashioned way by making a good app, which is really hard. So if I ever had an idea for a Mac app, even like an iOS or a Mac app, if I had an idea for an app that didn't exist that I would like, that I thought I could write, I would do it. But that stuff never comes together, and it's always like 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3.
But that's not directly answering my question, which is, let's say you had this great idea and you felt at least moderately confident that you could do at least a moderately passable job. Would the fact that you're Mr. Hypercritical scare you away from releasing it?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I mean, if anything, that should provide like a fountain of infinite ideas, because you can look at any app you use, any app you ever need to use, and you can say, oh, well, if I did it, it would be different in these ways.
Yeah, but do I want to do it? Do I think I would be capable of actually doing a better job? Do I really want to do it? Do I have, it's just, how much time it takes to make a real application. It's a big commitment, right? So it would really need to be like something like, oh, I've got to make this app. Like it would have to be like that, not just simply, oh, I think I could make a better one of those, because it just takes so much time. And like any notoriety I might have would encourage me, not discourage me, because all that would translate to is like, look, for every tiny point of internet notoriety I have, that is one extra point on sales possibilities, right? Like it's not fair, but that's the way it works. Like if people know who you are to begin with, then they'll know about your application at least. So you have such a leg up with awareness and everything. So,
oh yeah, if you got it, use it.
Yeah, so that wouldn't be the reason I would be doing it, but like it would have to be a fire under my butt. Where like, look, I need, like it was for you with Bugshot. Look, I just need this application to exist, and you're at the point where you can rattle that off in a week. Like I'm not at that point, so it has to be real. I have to just be like, look, I cannot sleep until I write this application, because my ramp up time would be significant starting from 0, right?
Even that, though, I mean, for me, it was like, I'm an experienced iOS developer, so it didn't take me that long. I already knew how to do all this stuff. The icon even accidentally made itself. And then, even that app, I said, I will spend a couple of days doing this app. That's all I can really justify spending on it, because it's going to make, like $20 a day for the next 2 years. So I can't justify doing a whole lot more on this app. Just a few days of work so I can get back to my other stuff. And a few days became like 10 days. Like it was like 7 days to build version 1, and then then I got a break while it was being approved, and then within a few days of it being released, I was working on 1.1 to fix all the bugs that everyone found, and then to add a couple of minor enhancements, and that took a couple more days. So all in, this is almost 2 weeks solid for this app, and and I should clarify for Sam the Geek in the chat room. Yeah, it's going to make $20 a day, maybe maybe for the next couple of months. After that, it might go down further to
he's absolutely
to 0.
Right. This is not a joke, and I probably shouldn't share this publicly, but whatever. I am genuinely excited when I get an App Annie email and the number on it is anything more than 0. That's like awesome. I just sold something to someone. That's really exciting. Right. So $20 a day is nothing to shake your fist at. And I know you said that jokingly, but that is nothing.
No, that's not a joke. I mean, that's like when I made Nursing Clock last year. The breastfeeding timer. I released that, and even that took a little bit longer than I thought it would. Even the app that had almost no effort into it at all, that took like a few days to really polish it and make it releasable in any shape. And even that, over its entire life, it made, I think, $70. I mean, it wasn't a whole lot. And I even ended up pulling it down after, I think, about 6 months or so, because there was somebody had tipped me off. There was a patent troll going around suing or threatening to sue people who made child care related apps. And even though mine was not wouldn't have applied, or the patent wouldn't have applied. We all know that doesn't really matter. And so I'm like, you know what? This app has made like $70 in 6 months. It's not even worth the risk of having a patent troll come after me. So I just pulled it down.
Patents fostering innovation.
Exactly. We should get to that, actually. But first, let me tell you about our second sponsor. Our second sponsor this week is a new sponsor, but you might have heard of them recently on other awesome shows and blogs. They are 23andMe. So 23andMe, it's a pretty cool service. It's a little hard to explain, but here's the gist of it. They are a DNA profiling service, and so here's what you do. You give them basically, they send you a kit. You give them a saliva sample. And, you don't have to, poke your arm or anything. There's no blood involved. You give them a saliva sample. You send it back, and they provide a return package. The lab analyzes it. And then it gives you a full report about stuff about you. So here's the gist of it. They gave you the tools to better understand how your genes may impact your health. So this helps you and your doctor find health areas to keep an eye on. They have over 240 personalized health, trait, and ancestry reports, and they can help you understand your genetics. So they give you ancestry information. You can discover your global origins. You can find if you have any celebrity relatives. They will give you a list of celebrities that are distant relatives of yours. You can also find other living relatives through their analysis. They have over 250,000 members. So this makes it the largest DNA ancestry service in the world, and so the chances of them finding something cool about you are pretty good. So anyway, it includes a few fun points too. It tells you how closely related you are to Neanderthals. Excuse me. They even can tell why you may not like cilantro. There's a gene for that. They can tell you how quickly you metabolize coffee, which of course is cool for me to know. So anyway, you can order your 23andMe DNA kit today for just $99 at 23andme.com/ATP. That's 23andme, the number 23, and then the words andme.com/ATP. Check it out. It's pretty cool. And just a really great way for, just to take a look at your DNA and to learn some cool stuff about yourself. So thanks a lot to 23andMe for sponsoring the show.
Is the asparagus pea smell gene, is that a genetic thing or is that not genetic?
I think that's everybody.
No. I mean, it's just, well...
I think you have to eat a lot of asparagus.
What I heard from third hand was that it was genetically related and that the people with the gene it made their pee smell and they could smell it. And people without the gene, their pee did not smell and they couldn't smell the other people's smelly pee.
I thought it was that the pee always smells, but only some people
some people can smell it. I don't know. I know nothing about it.
This is terrible because...
here we go. 23andme.com/health/asparagus metabolite detection.
Of course they would know this.
23andMe has got it covered, and it is genetic, apparently.
That's awesome.
Erin is a biology teacher. I could have asked her if she was home at the moment, but she is not. Oh, a good thing 23andMe didn't let us down.
Awesome. Anyway, thanks for sponsoring.
All right, so what else are we talking about?
Do you want to talk about Ask Patents at all?
Certainly
I do.
John, go for it.
Yeah, so this was a Stack Exchange site that was made months and months ago, wasn't it? Maybe last year.
Yeah, a while ago.
A long time ago. It was the brainchild of Joel Spolsky and the Stack Exchange guys in cooperation with the U.S. Patent Office, I believe, even from the get-go. And it's a Stack Exchange site like Stack Overflow or whatever. You ask questions or whatever. But this one is meant to collaboratively find prior art for patents. So someone will post a patent, and then other people will try to look up prior art for it and post it as the answer. So basically, the implied question, all of them is, here's a patent. Is there some prior art? And then anyone can post an answer and here's some prior art for this or whatever. And the goal of the site was to be okay, well, we all know these patents are stupid and trying to patent things that shouldn't be patentable, but it's really difficult, apparently, for the U.S. Patent Office to do the research necessary to find the prior art. Even though, when we look at it, can you just call up a graphics programmer and ask them, and they'll tell you the 8 times, anyway. And so that's how this was supposed to work. And finally, I think this was their very first confirmed case where a patent was posted, someone found an answer, and the patent was invalidated. And in the invalidation of the patent by the person in the U.S. Patent Office, they cited directly this answer on this site. And Joel did the answer, and Joel said it took him like 10 minutes of Googling to find prior, because again, it's not hard to find prior art for these things because the patents are awful, right? Joel wrote a story called Victory Lap for Ask Patents, describing the sequence of events and saying basically, look, this took me 10 minutes of Googling. If you hate patents and you're, a software developer or whatever, come onto our site, pick a patent that you think is stupid, Google for prior art, paste it in there, and wait for the incredibly slow wheels of government to turn, and 6 months later, maybe that patent will get invalidated. And of course, this was a Microsoft patent, and they're appealing, so who knows how it will end up coming out. But the interesting bit, this that I pasted into the show notes, is that Joel says that his dream is that companies will hear about this site and use it offensively against other companies. Because if like Apple or Google or whatever dedicates like 1 or 2 people to just go on that site and look for patents that Google is applying for and spend 10 minutes to go find prior art for them, that it will become like, so patents are sort of defensive where every company patents everything they can because it's good to have a big patent portfolio. But if each company also had an offensive wing who all they did was watch their competitors and watch for the super dumb patents that they apply for and then invalidate them all by finding prior art, that would be a good sort of mutually assured destruction scenario where large companies prevent each other from having terrible patents. Of course, this is not the actual solution. The actual solution would be maybe the U.S. Patent Office could do this work because it doesn't seem like it's that hard. It takes 10 minutes of Googling. And, of course, my position is that no patents should exist ever for anything. But anyway, every little bit counts. So I'm excited that at least one patent has been at least, if not permanently thwarted, then possibly delayed on its trip to being a super dumb patent. So good job, Joel, and the Stack Exchange guys.
Yeah, it's so cool this thing that Ask Patents even exists, and that the USPTO kind of encouraged it, or at least is being friendly with it. There is, of course, there's that great question of, Joel is a programmer, and he could look at this stuff from this Microsoft patent that he cited, and any others that you look on there, and he said he assumed going into this that it would be pretty hard to read patents and to figure out what they are and to invalidate them. But in fact, once he started trying to do it, that it was easier than he expected, and that it only takes a few minutes to read a patent. And he linked to a post, maybe linked to it too, about how to read a patent in 60 seconds, because they all try to be very obfuscated to try to get granted and try to get past any potential conflicts or duplicates, or to try to become more overreaching than they otherwise would have. Like they go for obfuscation to attempt to confuse the patent examiners. But so the problem is, if one working programmer, and granted Joel is a good and knowledgeable programmer, but still, if one programmer can look at a patent application and see through it that quickly, why doesn't the patent office, why can't they do something similar? If they can say, yeah, we can have, patents on graphics programming techniques, why can't they either have or contract with graphics programmers to look at any graphics related patents? Like that, I'm really glad that Ask Patents exists, and obviously it needs to exist, but why it needs to exist is kind of a problem.
Because it's a government agency, and they don't have infinite hiring money. You can't pay a graphics programmer or any they're outsourcing the part that that they can't be done at scale because there's a limited number of patent employees. Those employees only know about patents and know nothing about the domain areas. And by the same token, Joel could not have written that ridiculous document that codifies the rejection of the patent. Joel could not have written that because that requires the lawyer-like expertise of the people in the patent office to know what form you have to do things and what is a valid rejection and what must you That's the skill that they're bringing to the table. That to be able to navigate this legal, just like lawyers. You may have an intuitive feel of what's right and wrong and how to prove things, but if you're not a lawyer, you don't know how to actually do it, right? So. This is just finding the people look, you find me the prior art, and then the U.S. Patent Office says, we'll take it from here. So you did that part of the work for us. We'll take that and probably spend 10 times as much time doing this stupid legalese dance and this formal document structure to reject the patent and bringing it through all these bureaucratic. Just try clicking through to that rejection. He explains how to find the rejection. And there's the preliminary draft rejection finalized form. Try to read it. It just, you cannot penetrate even the rejection of the patent, let alone the patent itself. And that how to read a patent in 60 seconds is good because it tells you just ignore everything and go right to this section and look at these 3 things, and that's enough for you to get going. It's a broken, stupid, bureaucratic system that doesn't work right, and this does not make it better. Like, this doesn't cure it, but if anything that stops crappy patents from getting granted is a good thing. So, and this was just, like sort of the community trying to make government better, maybe not against their will, but certainly like, look, we're here to help you, and government saying, okay, we will accept your help in this matter. And then it producing at least one actual result.
Well, it's a brilliant idea if people are into it, but it seems to me that it's tough to get people into it. Said differently, here it is that the patent office is sort of kind of reaching out to the community and saying, hey, people who are experts in these things that patents are, go help us find this prior art. But the key is that we're experts. Joel is an expert, or at least you could easily argue as such. And I don't know how the patent office works internally, but I got to imagine they don't have an expert for every darn field of patentable stuff under the sun. And so it strikes me as a brilliant idea, but I'm not sure that when I get bored on a weekday evening night, I'm going to sit there cruising for patents to shoot down.
Well, I mean, Joel's got the right idea. He says, like, who is actually sufficiently motivated to use this site? And who's sufficiently motivated are the companies who get patents, because they have a financial incentive to prevent. Apple has a financial incentive to make every single Google Google files be invalidated, right? And vice versa. Google has that same motive. So if you can get these big companies with tons of money to put even a few people on this, it's so easy to do, because you're going to be invalidating patents in a domain that you know about. Apple probably knows about the domains that Google's going to file patents in, and vice versa, because they're both in the same industry. Get all these guys to, instead of spending all their energy patenting everything under the sun, take part of that energy, because now they have an influence. It used to be you had no way to get your other guys' patents invalidated. You had to wait for them to be granted or rejected, and then you could try to invalidate them in court. Whereas now, if the patent office is like, look, we're willing to accept some help here. This patent has been applied for. Here's the application. And Apple goes out and finds prior art and heads it off at the pass. Like, I don't know if those companies are actually going to do that, but they are the ones who have both the motivation and the skill to do this. I think it would be a great idea, because I hate all patents. Like I said, another thing that would cure this whole problem is just to eliminate the entire patent system and office and all the employees and all the legal framework and everything involved with it. That would also cure this problem and is the actual solution. But
that would actually promote innovation.
People don't want to hear that. So, but anyway, like you don't want to hear that. That's fine. We'll start with this. This would be fine too.
Yeah, I mean, John, both you and I believe, separately argued on our respective 5x5 podcasts a couple of years ago. I think we both argued that basically the entire patent system should be abolished. Is that fairly accurate?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that all this stuff is necessary is, and I think what bothers me about it, not to go too deep into whether the patent system should exist or not, because that would be a whole other show. But I think what bothers me so much about it is, like, it's a problem that just cannot be solved well. Like, it is just so, like, yeah, the patent office can't be expected to get everything right, but they get things wrong a lot. And the ramifications of that in the market are so incredibly destructive. I mean, whatever benefit patents are providing to people, I have to imagine there's an equal or greater amount of harm that they're causing, especially in the field of software. And it just seems like there's just no good solution to this. But I am very glad that Ask Patents is at least attempting to. It is improving it in one small way.
Yeah, and my objection was less practical, more ideological. I don't think there's any reason you should have monopoly rights to an idea, period. Like, it's not as if, like, what if the patent office was perfect and never made a mistake? There's no such thing. There is no right. There, as far as I'm concerned, you get no right to a monopoly on an idea that you come up with, no matter how awesome that idea is. Period. The end. And so, and if that's your position and that's my position, obviously, there's no such thing as a patent office that works. It's just it's an office that the only way it works is to not exist, because it's enforcing a right that I don't think is a valid thing that you shouldn't get a monopoly on an idea. You shouldn't ever. The end. But there's a huge continuum down to the pragmatic concern, like, okay, I think you should, but it's impossible to do correctly, therefore it should be gone, all the way up to like, oh, I think it should be gone for software because there's no such thing as a software patent because it's all math and everything's Turing complete and blah blah blah. Like, and business process patents shouldn't exist, and a whole big range. And when I talked about it on my show, I went to write for the jugular, which is like patents on drugs, which everyone thinks, all right, you can get rid of all the other patents, but we need these because otherwise no one will ever do any research into how to cure disease. And I talked about it at length there. We shouldn't rehash it here. But anyway, patents are terrible. Don't let your kids get them.
All right, does that mean we're done? That seems like a pretty good place to end to me.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Well, thank you very much to our two sponsors this week, Hover and 23andMe. And we'll see you guys soon.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin. 'Cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him. 'Cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MarcoArment, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
I just sold something to someone. I thought that was funny. If you're going to make fun of me, I think that's a much less jerky way of doing it. Because that was me talking about how excited I am that whenever I see a singular sale of fast text.
Someone trying to do JavaScript injection. I appreciate that they put the semicolon at the end of their statement. they don't stand for that JavaScript automatic semicolon insertion. Say, no, I'm going to put it explicitly so it's not confused. And yes, the people who wrote this Showbot application have minimal competence of web programmers. Escaped their input, which is not... it's probably still 50-50. Given all the websites that I see that won't let me type telephone numbers with hyphens in them.
Oh, God.
Apparently the bar has still not been raised.
How about American Express, where the maximum character length for a password is, I think, still 8?
Like, that's probably dictated by their COBOL-based mainframe interface or something. But the guys who don't let you type like stuff with the phone numbers, like they want you to only type digits, you can't type anything else. That, I just want to go to all their houses and find them and be like, no one is making you do this. Like, this is literally the simplest possible task that a programmer on the web has. It is completely closed. There are no edge cases. All you got to do is just let me type whatever the hell I want, remove everything except for the numbers. It's not rocket science. Like, no task is easier than that. Every other part of accepting that form submission is harder than that one task. And yet, big Fortune 500 companies will have forms that don't let you type anything except numbers in them. And will like beep at you, put alerts, automatically backspace the field. Like the automatic backspacing code, that's more complicated than stripping out the stuff. It's just, it boggles my mind that this goes on. And I wonder what regular people think who don't know, like, that is literally the easiest thing in the entire world of web programming to do. They're just like, oh, I guess you have to do it this way on this site. It must be really secure.
So let me tell you a true story that we cannot put in the show because it's really embarrassing, which means it's probably doomed to be in the show. When Aaron and I were getting married, I wrote in PHP, and I think it was my first PHP app. I wrote a website that would let guests, register or RSVP, among other things. And a good friend of mine, his surname has an apostrophe in it, and I noticed after he registered, because I had this like totally weirdo setups where I would email my phone to send my phone a text message back when that was still a thing. Well, anyways, so he registered, and all of a sudden everything was cut off as soon as I hit the apostrophe in his name, because I didn't escape anything, because I didn't know crap about web programming at the time. In fact, I taught myself SQL in order to write that site. And this was in 2007, because I was always living in thick client land until then.
Yeah, this is like people who don't learn from the past. I remember the first time I looked at the active record code in Rails, and I was like, Jesus, guys, like, bind parameters. It's the technology that has existed since forever. And you're like, just no, we're gonna make SQL by catting together strings and just inline all the values and what could go wrong. We have an escaping function. It should be fine, right? Jesus, like,
Wait, that's how they were doing it?
I believe the first version of Rails was not using bind parameters in their queries. They would build the SQL strings out of values, and like,
God.
I believe they had an escaping function of their own devising, which would be like, oh, if you see a quote, just double it or whatever. Like, and if this wasn't Active Record and I'm slagging off Rails when I shouldn't be, I'm sorry, but substitute Rails with any other type of thing. I see it all the time of like people who write database code in the modern era, like in this year, and don't know that bind parameters exist and just bravely plow forward. I mean, like Casey didn't know, that escaping was a thing you might want to do. But for the people who like that, I find more excusable than the people who know that you have to escape. So they write their own escaping function. They still feel like this is the best way to do it. Like, because once you know it's a problem, you would think you'd spend 3 seconds Googling like, oh, I see this is a problem and there's a name for it. And I bet there's some sort of technique to not have it anymore. Let me look that up. Yeah. The other favorite one is when people, well, this is not in any of your languages. Maybe it kind of is. And do you have either one of you ever, I don't know if this is a .NET equivalent, but in like Marco in your things, you can't even do this on iOS probably. Like, the system call, the word system.
Yeah, where it just shells out to the...
Right. Have you ever had to do that from iOS program, or is that just like not going to happen?
I don't think you can do it on iOS.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
It's probably forbidden. But at any rate, people who do that, like, they'll use bind parameters on their SQL code, but they'll come to a part of their program. I mean, Apple itself probably does it, or people writing Mac apps back in the pre-sandboxing days. They'll build a string, and they'll pass that string to system, right? And when you're building that string, what do you have to do? Well, you're like, oh, well, what if the file name has spaces in it? Well, let me put quotes in it. What if the file name has quotes in it? Let me write an escaping function. Like, they go through the same thing, and it's like, people, you're in C. Like, there's a million functions that you can use to fork an exec that take like lists of variable, VA list methods that take a variable list of parameters. You don't need the shell to parse it for you. Don't you understand? You can bypass that. You're already in a program. You're a programmer. You can write code. It's just, and because Apple itself does it in like their Perl stuff. When you're like, oh, if your hard drive name has a space in it, and you have one that has the same name without the prefix before the space, it will accidentally delete it, or like it was it iTunes installer that did that, or maybe it was the Myth 2 installer. Apple at various times has done the same. It's the same exact problem as the SQL things where they're like, I will just build a big long string and pass it through. What could go wrong? Like, instead of, it's basically what you have is a list of values. And they said, yeah, but every time I see this list of values in my normal life, it's one big long string. So I'll make it into a string and then give it to something that will break it into the list that I already had before I made the string. It's just, yeah, I don't know. We're supposed to make progress. I don't know. Certain areas we have to make progress not by teaching people the right way to do things, but by making it so they never have to do that thing again.
John, I love when you get fired up after the show. It's my favorite.
Oh, I still didn't even get to talk about Minecraft mods.
Someday.
Don't even start.
That's good. I'm gonna be angry. I'm trying to mellow out.
No,
I've got it a little bit under control, but
no, don't mellow out. Don't get talked about it. Let's talk about titles. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it.
Before the next show or whenever that may be, you two should be forced to install Minecraft and several mods on behalf of. If you don't, neither one of you has a child of the age who can play Minecraft. Maybe just like borrow one for the weekend and have them ask you to install Minecraft and the mods that they want. And just spend the weekend doing that, then you will also be sufficiently angry for us to have an all Minecraft mod anger episode after vacation.
If I get bored while I'm on vacation, I will do exactly
Find a
that.
neighborhood kid. Go, come over my house, and then
That's not creepy at all.
ask me to install Minecraft mods.
That's not creepy at all.
Well, maybe have your wife do it. That's what we do. I gotta get in touch with your wives and say, don't just pretend you're into Minecraft and ask Marco, hey, I saw this cool thing. Could you install Minecraft and these couple of mods for me? Because when your wife asks you to do it, it's just as bad. Because although I don't know if it's believable that they'd want to play Minecraft because it's more of a kid thing, but yeah, it's
Actually, Tiff tried it. I've never played Minecraft. Still.
Nor have I.
But Tiff actually played it for like one night, and just didn't really like it that much. But she did play it for one night, like a month ago or something like that. But I don't know. I'm kind of scared. Like I don't have to try heroin to know that I probably should never try heroin. Right? Like so, and I know enough about like hard drugs and their addictiveness to know that I should never even attempt them.
Now, is this the
I'm fine
heroin
with
clause or is this the Candy Crush clause?
Well, it's both. So same thing. So like when I hear
Right.
that a game is like super addictive and like takes over people's lives, like I don't have to play it. I'm not like, ooh, let me try that. No, I'm like, you know what? I don't really need that.
Why don't you pass that wisdom on to your wife?
Well, I did. I scared her away with oh man, Candy Crush. So quick story. So Tiff's phone it's an iPhone 5 and it had a failing sleep wake button, which I guess is a very common problem. And so I took it to the Apple people, and they swapped it. And so great, come back with a new phone. And we backed it up and did the whole sync locally to iTunes like that morning. Every app, all the music, all the photos, the entire keychain, everything restored perfectly, except Candy Crush. For whatever reason, Candy Crush just did not restore. It just was not there on the phone. So Tiff has lost her progress in Candy Crush. And this is like
did you have to pay
bad.
extra for that service?
I don't know. So the way she's been playing it, like when we first heard about it, I believe from Amy Jane Gruber on one of her various podcasts, or somewhere, or Twitter or something, that I got the impression that it was extremely addictive and that it could just take all of your money because you could just, you can like buy your way out of time limits and all the crap that the free to play BS games do, and so. I was like, do not install that game because it'll take all the money. It'll just suck away everything we have, everything we've worked for. All the money will be gone. So, to prove that I was wrong about that, Tiff has played the entire game not spending any money, and intends to continue that way. But apparently, it's a pretty hard game, and it's pretty hard not to spend money, which is why they make so much. So she's spent hours this week playing this game, and now it's restored and it's gone. And of course, they don't use any kind of iCloud or Game Center. Of course, they don't do anything right in programming the thing to actually make it keep your progress. No, that would cost them too much money. That would cause people to not buy upgrades. So of course, they don't do that because game programmers are so great these days. My slight rant. Thanks a lot, game programmers. But. Yeah, so I wonder how this is going to play out now. Like, if she'll have to buy her way out of this, if I will have to buy her way out of it out of guilt for somehow not having this thing synced with just that app.
If she wants to, bang her head against a very difficult-to-play application, you can get a Super Hexagon or Impossible Road or something, which do not ask for in-app purchases, but will nevertheless frustrate her for a lifetime.
Or Marble Madness.
Whose alarm is going off?
That's over here.
For a second there, I was like, "How? My garage is closed. I don't think it's me."
My windows are closed too.
All those times that I played Marble Madness after having spent the $40 on it and being so disappointed in how much it sucked for my Genesis, all that time, the game only has 6 levels. Yeah, 6 levels for $40. I never beat it. Because level 6, the whole game is really, really hard, and level 6 is just like, it's so ridiculous. I could not ever beat it. I came close a few times.
Super Monkey Ball for your it's a GameCube game, but you have a Wii that will play GameCube games. That is the probably the most difficult console game that I've played and enjoyed. I haven't played Dark Souls. People listening, games are more forgiving now than they were.
Just having like progress saving, that is a massive ease jump,
Yes.
like
Super Monkey Ball does not have that. Neither does Super Hexagon. Neither does Impossible Road. Now, have you played? That's the one you might have heard of and played. Have you played Super Hexagon?
No. What's it for?
For making yourself feel incompetent.
No. What?
It's for iOS.
All right.
Yeah, it's You should get it just because I think it's a really well done game. It has really nice music that you'll.
Oh, I've seen this.
You will hear 3 seconds of before you die.
Yeah, I've seen this, and I played it for about 8 seconds, and then
not contiguously, 8 seconds cumulatively. All if you could stay alive for 8 seconds, that would be something.
See, I don't like games like this. I also never cared for like games like Cannibalt and anything that's like just fast action, just go until you die, or like anything like that. I just don't. I get discouraged so quickly and easily from these games. I never want to play.
So you should never play a Super Hexagon or Impossible Road. Super Monkey Ball though, it has easy levels, so it's fun. It's fun to play. Like that's the only game like that that I've been motivated enough to play because it starts so easy. You're like, oh, this is fun and it's interesting and it's nice to look at it and it's neat music and it's mentally challenging. But the difficulty just goes on forever. And at a certain, it's one of those games where no matter who you are as a human being, with the exception of 7 people in the world, you will reach the limits of your ability, but only after a satisfying trail up to that level. Instead of just like Super Hexagon is immediately you suck now from second 0 you suck. Right? That is different. Impossible Road is I think is actually, I haven't played it enough to know it's probably a little bit harder than Super Hexagon, but I can't really tell.
So now, Marco, did you get into Tiny Wings when that was popular?
No, I've seen it. I think I played it on someone else's phone or something.
Because I like that one. Like, I've never played Cannonball, and I've seen it on other people's phones, but I like Tiny Wings.
Yeah,
I don't play it that often, but I like it.
Tiny Wings is charming.
I've seen a few things. Like there was like some kind of like skiing version of that I played for like an hour one time. But that like, I don't have the patience to like once I get going really far in one of those games and then I die and then I start over again. Like I just don't care. Like I'm so discouraged by having to start over again at that point and playing the exact same thing over and over again, even if it's like a little bit varied from like random generation or procedural stuff. Like even then, like I hate going back. That's one of the reasons. Like I was playing through Vice City with no, actually it was the original GTA 3, playing through it, and I almost beat the game, but there was this one mission where it took like 15 minutes to do the mission, and it was a timed thing where you had to do it within that 15 minutes, and I kept getting within like 10 seconds of succeeding and just barely missing it. And I just stopped playing the game. Like, I just never proceeded past that point. After like a few days of banging on that mission and doing it like 7 or 8 times and failing every single one, I just got so discouraged. I'm like, you know what? I'm done. That's it. I just never went back. It was the mission where you drive around trying to crush all the coffee stands in like 7 different parts of the town. I bet everyone who played GTA 3 probably remembers that mission and possibly stopped playing it there.
So this is one of the rites of passage of anyone who will eventually come to identify themselves as a gamer, is that everyone eventually meets that game with the frustrating level or the difficult thing that they feel like they're never going to get past. And people who will later in life call themselves a gamer get through that, and they consider it like a personal triumph and move on from it. And once you've done that once, you realize that there is nothing in the game that I can't do. I can always persevere. It's just a question of doing it. And it's not like a value judgment. Like if you decide your time is better spent doing something else, then fine or whatever. I'm just saying, like, the people who make that decision, they say, you know what, I'm going in this totally inconsequential place where there's no reason for me to do this. There's no reward waiting for the end of it. No one's going to care that I did it. I'm just alone here in my house. I've decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. And eventually you do it. It's an amazing feeling, and it gives you like a belief in yourself that it shouldn't, because it's like all you did was you press buttons on a controller. Like, this has no bearing on your ability to succeed in life or anything like that. But it feels amazing, right? And that's the great thing for people who are gamers. That's the amazing thing about games like Super Hexagon and stuff, is because it takes that gamer sense of thinking that there's nothing you can't beat and saying, no, actually, here, try this. And it's like, for one set of people, like, this is a new experience, because at this point, every challenge that I've come across, I've been able to surpass. So it's going to bring some people to say, I have reached my limits as a human being. No matter, I realize now, after my years of experience of beating things, that this is one place that I can't go any farther. And then for an even smaller percentage of people, it's going to make them initially think that, and then they are going to do it, and they're going to be like, I am now God. There's nothing. There is. It's like if you, after you've, getting back to drugs analogy, like, you've built up a tolerance, right? And the only way for you to get any sort of high is to get into the situation that is basically impossible, and either be defeated and have that be a novel sensation, or break through anyway and be like, there's now nothing I can't do. You are very far at the end of that spectrum. Is there any game type experience you've done where you feel like there's no way in heck I'm going to beat this? You forget it, you put the game down, you put it away for 6 months, and eventually say, you know what, I'm going to beat that, and you come back to it, or not with a 6-month gap, but any kind of thing where you feel like you've already decided, like, this is impossible, this is unfair, there's no way this can be beaten, I hate this game, but then have eventually gotten through it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like that's usually the outcome. I don't usually give up on the game completely, but there are just like certain things that just, like, anything that, especially that just wastes tons and tons of time doing the same thing over and over and over again in order to get to the point that I keep failing. That drives me nuts.
Yeah, that's part of the experience. Exactly. Of course they do that. Of course, like the most extreme case is the ones where there was no saving, right? Because then, like, if the whole thing would be like that, you'd spend like 5 hours on a weekend getting to the place where you die all the time, only to die all the time. So like your code compile debug cycle is like 4 hours long, and you're like, you do the math in your head, like, how many tries is it going to take me? And if each time I do the try, and then eventually you can't even get up to that level anymore, and you're going into that downward spiral where you're not even getting halfway to the place where you're going to die anymore, and you have to take a break from it. Like, that's the whole, like, that's what I'm talking about. That's the whole experience. And that's totally the worst. And that's why the games are gentler, where you get some kind of save or some other way to do it. But yeah, back in the day, you play those NES games, was like, was it Bionic Commando, the one where you had to shoot a missile at Hitler in a helicopter as you flew by him on the screen, like, 30 frames a second, and you got basically one shot at it, and the first time it happened, you had no idea it was coming, and now you're just like, oh, we got to play through the whole game again to get up to that one scene and give it another try. That was a different age.
See, I had a terrible horror story with the NES, because I had what was it, Dragon Warrior? That was the original, not the original RPG, but it was one of the first RPGs in the NES. And
please email Casey.
Please email me. No, don't really. But anyways, I want to say, please don't email me, that the highest level you could get to was like 25, and I got up to level 21 or something like that. And then my little brother, and to this day, I'm not sure if he was being a jerk or if he did it accidentally, but he erased my save game or whatever, and I never looked at that game again because it took me hours. I
that
remember
could ruin a friendship.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's still his brother. You can't get rid of him.
I tried, but I couldn't. But oh man, that made me so angry. To this day,
that's the other thing. That's the other element that could turn you off. Is like if you feel like something unfair has happened. Like it's not the game, it's not you, it was your brother, and like that's not fair. Like I was willing to accept all the crap this game could throw at me and try it, but now someone has deleted my save game, and it's like, all right, that one, it's like foul. Out of bounds. Oh
yeah, the reason why I never beat Vice City is that I was playing it during college and on my roommate's Xbox. And when he went home for the summer, I'm like, well, there it goes. That's it.
He saved you.
Yeah, but like Tiff and I were playing it. We were playing it for like months, and we got to what had to be like almost the end of the missions. And yeah, like I ended up getting my own Xbox eventually, but then it's like I'm not going to start over. And there was no good way for me to like get the save game from him and put it on mine. Like that wasn't going to happen. So I just
if the game's good enough, you'd want to start over.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like I wouldn't get any pleasure out of like replaying the GTA missions because I like them at the time. The first time I'm playing through, I like getting accomplishing those things and getting it done. But like I never want to go back and do these things over again because it's just so time consuming and so many of them are so tedious.
Yeah, it's kind of like favorite movies. Most people like to see their favorite movies more than once in their entire life. Like, that's what makes them their favorite movies. Not that you need to watch it every month or even every year, but your favorite movies, you don't be like, I've seen that one already. Like, you'll watch it. You'll watch it if it ends up on TV or, whatever. That's what it's like with favorite games with gamers. It's like, not like you're going to play it every month or every year or whatever, but like every 5 years or so, you feel like I have to play my favorite game again because it's been too long.
Right, yeah.
So how often do you play Journey?
I played Journey so many damn times, so I'm taking a break from. Now at this point, I do it pretty much on the year anniversary of Journey. I play a little bit, but like my new thing is getting other people to play Journey. I'm spreading the love to others.
It's just 2 hours. Find a PS3.
So I can't even believe you. You already have the PS3. I think you already have the game.
Yep.
Oh, you were just trolling the shit out of him right now.
He's just denying himself a good experience. Or, I mean, Journey really is a gamer's game, though. So it could be that it's appeal. It's like a movie fan's movie. Like someone who's a real big cinephile. If that's the word. Like movies that they love, the general public might not love. But I think I think Journey may be a crossover hit. We'll see. What about you, Casey? What's your Journey excuse?
I don't have a PS3.
All right. Well, when Marco's done with his, he'll send it to you. Because he's not using it for anything else, apparently.
On a very, very quick final note, I tweeted like 2 minutes before the show. I just filled my car, my tank miles per gallon, 15.
I saw.
Yeah, I saw that. I was thinking like I would love to get that.
I was thinking I get like double that if I ever measured my mileage, which I don't.
I think this moment right here perfectly encapsulates the three of us.
Definitely.
It perfectly encapsulates our cars, anyway.
There are apparently there is a game called Candy Crisis. People are saying this is the Puyo Puyo clone for Mac. It's very well known. It looks like it might even be open source.
Yeah, it might have been the name of it.
It's GPL.
I just didn't recognize the screenshots. Like, they didn't look familiar to me. Yeah, some of these screenshots still don't look familiar to me. I mean, there could be more than one of these. I don't doubt that there's more than one.
I'm totally getting this. I'm so good at this game. No one. I tweeted like I'm always good at the games that nobody else plays, which of course that probably just
People
means I'm
play
not.
this. They call them casual gamers, Marco. It's okay.
No, but there's like
Only John is judging you.
I'm really good at Moonbase Commander too, and Moonbase
You're what?
Commander nobody plays. Right?
I thought you said Rubik's Cube. I was like, what?
No, that's like one of my like I'll never get to it ideas is I would love to make Moonbase Commander for iPad, but it's just never going to happen. Like first of all, even though it was a $5 game in like 2001, it's still probably beyond my ability to make because I'm not really a game programmer, and it would be like I'm sure maybe I could do it if I had nothing else to do for like 5 years, but I wouldn't. It would be a tremendous waste of time for me to try to make that because it's so far outside of my expertise.
Sprite Kit.
Maybe,
Ah,
but
The games practically write themselves. Automatically compiles your images into asset files.
great.
You should watch those dev seminars. Sprite Kit is like Scene Kit. You could not make a 3D game with because it's just for adding 3D to your apps like Dojo Slumber 3. But Sprite Kit, you could make a sprite game with.
Isn't it basically just like Apple's ripoff of Cocos 2D, or is there more to it?
No, I mean, it's like basically you've got core animation, right? So you've got all the makings of a sprite kit, but anyone who actually wants to make a game out of that is not going to use a bunch of core animation layers. There's things that sprite, collision detection and compiling all your assets into big files and pulling out chunks of them or whatever. And this does that for you. Like this makes it so that you might be people who are thinking of making a game but had no idea how to do it. Sprite Kit now suddenly puts their game into the realm of possibility because it's not like you're not going to make an awesome game that's groundbreaking, but you're going to make a competent game provided you have good artwork or whatever. So yeah, it does the things that Framework's supposed to do, which is like people who could not make this program before now can because smarter people have come and given them more lower layers. And it's impressive because you actually can make a game out of it. Like they did in the demo, they had an actual game, not a good game, not an amazing game, but you look at it and you go, you know what? That's fine. Someone who has like the skills to make a game in terms of level design and character design, but not the skills to make a sprite engine. Now you can get stuff on iOS, and of course the best thing about it is it's iOS only. So those people who do it won't have the skills to port their game to any other platform.
nice.
Platform lock-in, woo! No, but you should just watch the dev seminars. They're fun dev seminars. They have games in them.
I
you
would
get to
watch them if
see-
I could, but I can't.
Oh,
because
that's right.
Everything's down, and I don't download all the videos.
If only you
NAS.
had the foresight to download them all the day they came out, like I've done every year.
Someday. Now I have all this space, and I finally have like a large storage and backup thing set up. Oh God, I have UPSs everywhere now too. I have because I got this analogy, and I'm like, you know what? I should probably put this on a UPS. And so I like upgraded my main UPS for my Mac Pro, moved the old one into the closet for that and the router and stuff.
Does the SMT 1500 have a fan?
Oh my God, you and your fans.
It does have a fan, but I think it only uses it when it's running on DC power. Because like normally, I mean, I'll have to try to pay attention. I'll have to put a load on it when the Mac Pro's off, so I could tell more directly. But as far as I can tell, the fan is not running normally. I certainly can't notice it next to a Mac Pro with no hard drives in it, which should tell you something.
Doesn't tell me anything. Tells me nothing.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm hanging up on you two. I got to go pack.
All right. Enjoy your
but,
beach.
And to be honest, I'm sort of dreading it. I don't know. I've not been to the beach at a time when I enjoy drinking alcohol, which I really enjoy.
You go to the beach every 5 years?
I haven't been to the beach for more than a few
God,
hours.
Casey,
in
we need to have
forever.
a beach intervention for you.
I hate the beach. It's hot. I hate the feel and the smell of
Oh,
suntan
God,
lotion.
what's wrong with you? Where did you grow up again?
God.
I will do anything to avoid using
What is-
sunblock.
Oh, amen.
What is
Amen. to that.
wrong with you people?
Sunblock smells like.
Well, no matter what, it gets in my eyes. Like
That's
no matter where I put it, no matter how careful I am, it always gets
It's
in my
like
eyes
those.
and burns.
This is like those commercials where they have this device to cook eggs, and they say eggs are so hard to make, and the guys get eggs in their hair, and the shells are in their eyes, poking them. Sunblock always gets them. No, it doesn't. If you have a tiny
hate
bit of
sunblock.
competence, you can not get the
I hate
eggshells in your
sunblock.
eyes, and not
Even if you don't get it in your eyes, it still smells like. And you got to sit there and you're
There's a million
cooking.
kinds of sunblock. What do you mean it smells crappy? There's
It
a
smells
million
like
kinds of
you're all,
sunblock.
then you're all slimy for all day. And then what do? When you start to sizzle, you have to flip over. It's like you're freaking egg yourself.
You guys may be
Then you
doing
get
it
up and you
wrong.
walk. Then you get up and you walk across the sand that's melting the bottom of your feet. And then you get in the water, which you accidentally get in your mouth. And then all of a sudden,
What beach are you going to anyway?
what is it? Kill Devil Hills, which is a great name for a freaking beach in the Outer Banks.
Oh God, non-beach
And then
people.
And then you get in the
What's
water.
wrong with you?
You get in the water and you stop clenching your lips shut as hard as possible, and suddenly all the salt that is in the entire world is in your mouth. And you can't even drink the water because then you get more salt in your mouth.
All these experiences you're describing are the same experiences the people who like the beach enjoy, but you're giving them a negative spin. The smell of the salt air, the feel of the sand under your feet, the smell of sunblock, even suntan oil, cocoa butter smells. No. You guys are deprived of important experiences in your formative years, and now are broken adults who can't.
And the
enjoy
funniest
beach.
part of this entire discussion is we met 20 yards from a beach. Although the difference being that was a lake beach, which I enjoy.
No,
as opposed to
lakes
an
are gross.
Ocean beach.
Filled with disgusting smelling water and mud.
Yeah,
I'd take-
and
I'd
also
take that.
we were not wearing sunblock. We were inside using computers.
That's true.
There was no salt. There was no sand. There was no sun.
You got the programmer's tan. That's what
We
I've
had
got.
the programmer stand. Oh, God.